Hey guys, welcome back to Oopsie Daisy. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm your host, Amanda Herdler, and I really am honored that you have chosen to put me and this podcast in your ear and spend some time with me today. So I hope this blesses you. I hope it changes you, and I hope this pushes you closer to God, because what I have to share with you today has kind of been in my mental crock pot for the last probably 3 or 4 months. I have been walking through this crazy kind of season that I've never walked through before, and everything has felt a little bit uncomfortable. My relationship with the Lord has changed, not in a bad way, just kind of challenging the status quo and all the things that I used to do and the things that used to work when I seek Him haven't been quote unquote working. Like I haven't felt quite as close to Him by doing those exact same routines again. So I've just been stretched in a lot of ways to like reach out further for Him and to pursue Him a little bit deeper, a little bit harder. And I think that's very intentional on His part, because while it's been a little bit uncomfortable, I have grown so much over the past few months. When I was in the middle of this season, I kind of kept crying out to God going, why does everything feel weird? Why does everything feel different? Why all of a sudden do my spiritual disciplines and my practice of my faith feel like it doesn't quite fit? And week after week, day after day of that season, I kept seeing things pop up about wrestling with God. And that's one of the ways that I've learned that God also speaks to me. God speaks in a million ways, you guys, a million. If you are not hearing words from God, that's okay. He speaks through your circumstances. He speaks in your situations. He speaks through music, through things that pop up in your everyday life, through other people. Don't get stressed if you're like, oh, I don't hear God's voice in my head. It's possible that you're just not quite paying attention to the right frequency that He's communicating on right now. So I challenge you to sort of like change the station. Instead of being obsessed with words in your head, start looking for music that keeps popping up, lyrics that seem to sort of resonate in around the same topic, book titles that come across your desk, recommendations, sermons that you hear and listen to. God uses everything. He's always speaking to you. It's not that He chooses to speak to some people more or less. It's just some people are A, paying attention, B, can shut their mouths long enough to actually hear, and C, understand that God speaks in many, many ways. Just be encouraged in that, because in my last season too, I'm usually a word hearer. I've talked about that a lot on this podcast. I usually hear God's voice in my head very clearly with words, like I'm kind of reading a book, which doesn't surprise me because I'm a huge word nerd and a bookworm. So He uses that kind of gifting and that passion in my life to speak to me. But He really stretched me in the last season and started just sort of like popping books up. I was at a used bookstore, and the first book that I saw on an end cap when I walked in was called Wrestling with God. Every sermon that I stumbled on YouTube that looked interesting somehow brought about this idea of wrestling with God. Finally, when I realized that He was trying to get my attention, I started to pay attention to it and sort of dig into that and go, okay, God, what are you talking about? Why do you keep showing me this? So naturally, it makes sense to take this to the Bible, to figure out, okay, if I'm wrestling with God and God is actually bringing up the words wrestling with God to me, let's see what the Bible has to say about this. It landed my butt right in Genesis 32, where Jacob wrestles with God. Let's do like a hypersonic review of who Jacob was, just to set the stage for this story. So you understand what's leading up to this story. So if you remember, Jacob is the younger son of Isaac. Him and his older brother Esau were very, very different. Jacob was like a mama's boy, kind of a softie, and Esau was like this big, burly man that would hunt, and he had red skin. And Jacob tricks Esau into trading him the opportunity to get the firstborn's blessing for like a bowl of stew. And so Jacob takes this and basically goes and deceives his own father, who is hard of sight. Hard of sight? Is that how you say it? Blind? I don't know. This man couldn't see. So Jacob puts this wool or this animal fur on his arm and reaches out to his dad and essentially gets the blessing that was intended for Esau. So Esau's furious, rightly so, plans to kill Jacob, and Jacob takes off running. So Jacob's on the run and lives away from home for many, many years. And eventually God calls Jacob to return back home. But this means facing Esau again. And the last he knew was that Esau was murderously angry. So Jacob is terrified. He sends gifts ahead. He divides his camp as he travels in case Esau attacks because he doesn't want all of his party killed. And he's like, let's just split us up so we only lose half of us if my brother decides to go rogue. So that leads us up to where we are now. He travels to meet his brother, and the night before he's supposed to meet Esau, Jacob is alone. He sends some people ahead across the river and decides to spend the night on the other side by himself. And that's where we pick up the story in Genesis 32. Verse 24 starts like this. This left Jacob all alone in the camp, and a man came and wrestled with him until the dawn began to break. When the man saw that he would not win the match, he touched Jacob's hip and wrenched it out of his socket. Then the man said, let me go, for the dawn is breaking. But Jacob said, I will not let you go until you bless me. What's your name? The man asked. He replied, Jacob. Your name will no longer be Jacob, the man told him. From now on you will be called Israel, because you have fought with God and with men and have won. Skipping down to the end of the chapter, it says, the sun was rising as Jacob left Peniel, and he was limping because of the injury to his hip. There are so many nuggets of gold in that story, and there's so many angles we can talk about. But what I want to focus on is really this wrestling and the outcome of that wrestling. I read that while I was wrestling with God and just kind of trying to figure out why everything was different. None of it really made sense until a couple weeks ago, like on the back side of that season, as I've changed my routines, how I approach God, how I talk to him, what I feel like his expectations for me are. As I learn to rest and to shut my mouth and listen and just be more humble towards him, he really started pulling out the gold in this story for me. Jacob wrestles all night, and he refuses to let go without a blessing. I think there's so many of us that pray desperately for blessings, for favor, for our prayers to be answered, for new jobs, for healed marriages, for finances. For all of these things, we pray for these things, but are we really willing to spend the entire night wrestling with God for them? I know me, I'm guilty of just sort of like knocking on God's door, dropping a prayer, and then ding-dong ditching. You know what I mean? Like, okay, God, here's what I want. I'm just going to lay here and I'm going to run and I'm never going to talk to you about it again. And I'm not willing to do any of the work that he's asking of me in order to become a person that deserves that blessing, that can handle that blessing, that will live life well with that blessing. I've started to realize that God does not answer my prayers sometimes because my character, my habits, my discipline, who I am as a person can't handle the yes yet. And so he makes me wait. And in the waiting and in the wrestling, God changes me. He changes my heart. He changes who I am. It's not that he doesn't want to bless us, but he doesn't want the blessing to kill us. Here's an example. This is like a really real and raw example for you that I hate talking about. So when I started this podcast, I wanted it to get big. And I wanted it to get big enough to like make an income off of it and have a ton of people listen to it. And so I ran after it really hard. And I ran after it with wrong motives. Yes, I knew I was sharing about Jesus. And yes, my heart was very pure in wanting this to encourage other Christians. But I think deep down, a lot of the decisions I made, the topics I decided to talk about had more to do with like what's going to reach the audience rather than what God wants me to say. And for a long time, the podcast didn't grow. I had barely any listeners. I was doing it the night before it was supposed to come out. I was staying up till 2:00 in the morning trying to edit it and make it perfect. Like I just wasn't doing it with excellence. And yet I was still praying, okay, God, I want to be a full-time podcaster. I want to make an income from this. It's very obvious to me that my character, my motivation, my habits could not have sustained that had he decided to make that my full-time job. I would have fallen on my face. I would have quit making money. It would have affected my family. So here I was begging for a blessing that I thought I needed. And God was like, I know better. You need some time to learn. You need some time to grow. Especially over the last year, as this has become a weekly podcast, I have continued to wrestle with him about what I'm supposed to do, how I'm supposed to do it, how I'm supposed to carry that, what that looks like. And he has grown me so much. I'm not saying now that I'm ready for this to be my full-time job. I also think that takes a lot of the joy out of it too. When you're constantly chasing this financial carrot ahead of you, I think it skews your motives a little bit. And so I finally feel like I'm in a place where this has become very, very pure. And I see now who I had to become in order to reach this place. But way too often, we're so focused on the blessing that we aren't willing to wrestle and become who we need to be to steward God's favor, to steward the yes to our questions. Sometimes in order to receive a blessing from God, you have to struggle with God. You have to be willing to put in the time to be changed, to let go of everything you know and like and want to do and who you'd prefer to be, and give it all to him and say, okay, God, who do you need me to be? And Jacob does this. I don't know if it's willingly or not, but it went down that way. The man wrestled with God and he walked away changed forever. For the rest of his life, Jacob carried evidence of the fact, and he walked away changed in two ways. From that day forward, he walked with a limp and he got a new name. Names were super important in Bible times. They were directly tied to your identity, to your purpose, to kind of like your destiny. I hate that word, but just like who God called you to be was often directly tied with your name, which is why you see God renaming people in the Bible. Abram became Abraham. Sarai became Sarah. Jacob became Israel. God changes our identity when we're willing to wrestle with him and struggle with him. And like the name thing I get, Jacob meant heel grabber. And the Bible talks about the fact that when Jacob was born, he came out of the womb hanging on to his brother's heel. And it's kind of like this idea of being like a deceiver or a trickster, which he was several times throughout his life. And he gets renamed Israel, which is like this incredibly strong and sort of honorable name that talks about how you have wrestled with God or fought with God and fought with man and you've won. So I get that. Like, sure, God, rename me. Rename me from being distracted and unfocused and anxious and controlling and unsuccessful and inconsistent, and rename me to be consistent and hardworking and impactful and wise. Like, do all of that. I get that. Change my identity, God. But the thing that doesn't make sense to me is the fact that he walked away with a limp. Jacob walked away from his encounter with God weaker and damaged. And as I sat with that, I realized that that's truly how life goes. That the biggest blessings in my life have come from the hardest changes, the hardest seasons, the transitions, losing jobs, letting go of plans, things that feel like a loss. Those things have changed me and grown me more than the good times, the easy times, the times when everything is going right. I've wrestled with God over the last 3 months, and I have been emptied of my certainty, relying on my own plans and figuring out what I need to do next. That's gone from me. I've been emptied of my pride, thinking that I can do it all, that I am strong enough, that I have enough energy, that I have enough focus, that I have enough strategy in my own head to tackle everything without leaning every ounce of my being on him. I've lost that. I cry easier now. I do. You guys are probably like, well, she'd be crying all the time anyway. But I truly have lost the hard shell around me that keeps me tough. I've lost money. He's called me to give things away that I'm not comfortable with, to bless organizations and people in ways that I wouldn't have before because my security came from my money. I've lost friends who weren't bad people, but God was taking me to a new place, and He knew that I needed to let go of everything that was behind me in order to come forward. I've lost my overconfidence, this over-reliance on the natural skill and gifting that God has given me to get me through. I've realized it's a poor crutch to lean on, and it's going to break at any second. Because what happens when I run out of my human resources, when I run out of energy, when I can't think of anything funny or wise or smart to say, to teach, I can't stand on my own skills anymore. God has truly done an overhaul on sort of my personality and my heart and my behavior. So I've lost a lot of pieces that I carried with me for decades. And in the world's eyes, you guys, none of that is good. We're supposed to be proud. We're supposed to be strong. We're supposed to be confident, aggressive. We're supposed to boss up, make moves, save your money, do the hustle, make it happen. Know who you are because you're enough. That's what the world tells us. But I've lost all of that. So in the world's eyes, I'm just limping along. But I've realized that limp is an incredible blessing. Because what God has done is empty me of me. All of the broken and damaged and weird parts that are holding me back, that are keeping me stuck, that are causing friction in my relationships, that are hurting other people, that are causing me to be prickly. He's sanding those edges. He's polishing those corners. He's emptying those closets in order to make room for what's actually supposed to be there. And so I do walk with the limp, but now maybe the limp is sensitivity. It's a new dependence on God. It's a softness. It's a humility. It's a slower temper. It's more connection to my emotions. It's less ego. It's a softer place to land for people that I love. And maybe that's the blessing we need to start chasing, especially in seasons of transition. If you think about this, Jacob was on the other side of this river, and the next day he was going to go meet his brother, and this was going to go one of two ways. It was going to go really well, and his brother was going to be like, yo, miss you, bro. Get in here. Give me a hug. Or he was going to slaughter the man and all his people. And so Jacob was really on the edge of a transition in his life. After that night, nothing in his life would ever be the same. And I think we kind of internally feel those seasons. We're like, something's changing. And our natural reaction is like, I need to get big. Like, God, I need to get strong. I need to get loud. I need to get ready. I need to get more powerful. I need all of this stuff. I need to get more money. I need to get more time to get ready for this. Like, we think we need more, that we need to be blessed with more as we go into transition. But what if the blessing wasn't external? What if the blessing was the breaking? What if what you need for your next season and to walk into what God has for your life is to lose some stuff, to leave some stuff behind, to be humbled, to be taken off your high horse a little bit, have Him break you down in order to rebuild you in His image? What if that's where you're the most blessed? There's a pastor that I like to listen to sometimes when I need my butt kicked. It's Pastor James McDonald. I don't know what church he's with right now. Look him up. His podcasts are great. His sermons are great. And he talks about letting God take you to the mat. Now, I'm not a wrestler. Never been a fan. It's real sweaty, like cauliflower ears, fungus, in like naked little swimsuits on the mat. Not my thing. Not my thing. But he talks about getting so real and so intimate with God that you can look God in the face and essentially say, take whatever you want. Do whatever you want with me. Be real with me. Be honest with me. Where am I screwing up? What needs to change? And what needs to die in me in order to become who you want me to become and go where you want me to go, Lord? What do you have to knock out of me? And we're afraid. We're afraid to let God take us to the mat. We are afraid to wrestle with God because this passage shows us wrestling means something has to die in you. There is a surrender piece and a submission piece to wrestling with God that most of us are really, really uncomfortable with. It exposes our pride, our control, our self-sufficiency, our hidden idols, our false identities, the comfy, cozy, sinful habits that we're hanging on to. And it's this sense of, okay, if I take this to God, if I'm really let God be real about this, I don't think I'm going to like his answer. And I'm not willing to take the steps that I think he might ask me to take. We also hate wrestling with God because it feels like losing. In our worldly eyes, surrender equals defeat in everything. If you're the first one to back down from an argument, it means you lost. If you're not the loudest one in a debate, you lost. I think about this with my cats too. Like, we watch them sort of like battle each other. And the first one that sort of just puts its head down and slinks away, we're like, oh yeah, you got your butt whooped. We're just like watching cat gang fights over here. But this is where kingdom thinking comes into play. To the world, surrender is defeat. Surrender is loss. Surrender is coming into second place. Surrender is not being the alpha. And those things aren't great. But in the kingdom, losing control and letting go is where we win freedom. When we're willing to admit our weakness and our places of confusion, our instability, our uncertainty, our inability to do things, that's where, when we start to admit those places and what we're struggling with, that's when God can really come in and heal them. God can't and won't heal what you won't hold up in your hands for him to touch. He can't and won't heal places of yourself that you stay hidden because you want to stay in control of. Another reason we avoid wrestling is because we confuse peace with avoidance. And this one is really, really sneaky. Avoiding things with God can really feel peaceful because nothing ever changes. You're never really pushed into transition. You're never really pushed outside your comfort zone. It's like, if I don't ask, then I don't have to hear. If I don't wrestle, I don't have to change. And the actual going through and letting God change you, it's very uncomfortable. He strips things away that you have held on to for years and years and years. And this is scary and it feels weird, but peace comes from the other side of that. The thing I find most interesting about this whole story is that Jacob didn't approach God to wrestle him. God, in the form of a man, came to Jacob and engaged him in a wrestling match. This kind of challenges these stereotypes that we have in 2026 Christianity, that it's like long, flowy-haired, teddy bear Jesus who always wants to make things soft and comfortable for you. And my friend, I am sorry to be the one to tell you, but I'm going to hold your hand while I say it because I love you. That's just not true. It's not. God knows that our own comfort, our own motivations and instincts and drives is often our biggest enemy to our growth. It's often the thing that pulls us away from God. And what God is trying to do is bring us closer and closer, because the closer we get to him, the more time we spend with him in his presence, the more we become like him. And we reflect his image, and we're called to be image bearers, be a mirror to reflect the glory and the goodness and the love of God onto other people. We can't do that when our mirror is damaged. We got have you ever seen those old fashioned medieval mirrors that are just like sort of this piece of tin that's kind of hammered? I don't know how anybody thought they looked good back then, but that's the kind of mirror we're often working with. And God wants to refine us and change us for the better. And we resist that at every turn. We dig our heels in whenever possible because we want to stay safe, we want to stay secure, we want to stay comfortable, and we want to stay with what we know, even when what we know is bad for us. This reminds me of a verse in Psalms. It's Psalm 32, 8, and 9. I'm going to read it in two versions for you so we can really get the big picture of it. It says, "The Lord says, I will guide you along the best pathway for your life. I will advise you and watch over you. Don't be like a senseless horse or mule that needs a bit and bridle to keep it under control." So the bit and the bridle are the piece that go in a horse's mouth and kind of around its head, and it's attached to the reins so that the rider can yank it back and forth and tell it where to go. It's kind of like a very aggressive way to show a horse which way to go. Listen to this in the Passion Translation. "I hear the Lord saying, I will stay close to you, instructing and guiding you along the pathway for your life. I will advise you along the way and lead you forth with my eyes as your guide. So don't make it difficult. Don't be stubborn when I take you where you've not been before. Don't make me tug you and pull you along. Just come with me." We spend so much time and energy bucking what the Lord does for us that there comes a time where he will come to wrestle with us, where he will make it plain and obvious that this is the direction you need to go, and now we have to do it the hard way. I think that's where I was for the last 3 months. God has been stripping everything away from me and rebuilding me, and I've hated it. And I have fought over and over, just violently within myself have I fought to keep everything the same. And so it got to the point where God was like, it's going to get very uncomfortable for you, because instead of taking my word and the things that I've been showing you and embracing them and applying them, you've bucked it. You've held on to your comfort. You've held on to what you want to do. It's not working. You're drowning. You're making a mess of everything. And now I got to yank on your bridle a little bit. It's not really punishment when we have to wrestle with God. I do think, however, that there's an easier way to do it. If we just lived a little bit more open-handed with our lives and our minds and our hearts and ourselves in general, and just say, okay, Lord, I will change whatever you want me to change. I'll give what you want me to give. Mold me where you want to mold me. I'm not going to fight you on this. We got to quit walking away from God, numbing out with things that aren't healthy, distracting ourselves, trying to perform spiritually and be a good little Christian. We have to quit pretending we're fine and that everything's working well the way you have it set up, because I don't think it is. I don't. And so if that's where you're at, I encourage you to open your hands and say, okay, God, I'm ready to wrestle. I'm ready to come face to face with you in an intimate moment and have you push out parts of me that I don't need anymore and that are damaging. And when he starts to do that, it's uncomfortable, but let it happen and let go. And when you're done, embrace the weakness, because in that weakness, in that new tender self, in those new fledgling habits and behaviors that he's creating in you, you look more like him. We all desperately want God's blessing. We want the growth. We want depth. We want peace. We want intimacy. We want all these things, but intimacy with him is not built around comfort. It's built into the surrender. So if you're in a season right now that feels really uncomfortable, where it feels like something in you is sort of being pulled apart and stripped away and burned off and nothing quite fits like it used to, don't assume that there's something wrong. It might mean he is engaging with you in a new way to strip some things off of you. You're not going to walk away more in control of your life. You're not. You're not going to always walk away with more courage or more money or a better job or a fixed relationship, but what you will walk away with is a different heart, a deeper dependence on God, a foundational, unshaking, root growing trust in him because you know you're not enough in every situation and you aren't supposed to be. We all want the blessing, but you have to be willing to accept the limp to get it. So if you see me along the street, just like give me a little wave and know that supernaturally I'm just limping along. That I am weak, that I have wrestled with God and walked away changed. And I'm just like a little bit tender for it right now. But you know what? I hope you are too. That's all I got for you today. I love you guys. We'll talk next week.